Every single day, we make tiny choices without realizing they might be shaping our future, or silently stealing it. What if 5 simple things you could start today might dramatically lower your cancer risk? No gimmicks, no scare tactics, just science, ancient wisdom, and everyday habits you've overlooked. Stay with me, and you might never look at your daily routine the same way again. There's a peculiar thing about the way we live our lives. We hurry through our days, tangled in the immediate, consumed by the tasks we must accomplish, the people we must please, and the goals we feel obligated to chase. All while, somewhere just out of sight, a silent force waits. It does not rush, does not clamor for attention, but it is relentless in its patience. It's called cancer, and whether we acknowledge it or not, it has long since become one of the great quiet battles of our time. We think of it only when it strikes someone we know, a neighbor's wife, a distant uncle, a friend from school whose name resurfaces when bad news arrives. For a fleeting moment, we wonder if it could come for us too. And then, as quickly as the thought appears, it vanishes beneath the steady current of daily distraction. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if, instead of waiting to confront the shadow after it has darkened our doorstep, we could face it long before it made its move? Not through grand, impossible gestures, but through the most ordinary of acts. Choices made so simply, so quietly, that they slip into our lives like a gentle tide, changing everything in their wake. This story isn't about fear. It isn't about statistics or dire warnings. It's about life. About small things done with care and intention that have the power to shape your days, protect your body, and quietly fortify you against the unseen adversary. I remember a man from my youth named Thomas Ashford. He wasn't famous, nor particularly remarkable to anyone who didn't know him. A tall, gentle man with weathered hands and the kind of eyes that carried a trace of boyhood mischief even into old age. Thomas lived to 98. When asked about his secret, he would chuckle softly and say, "I paid attention." And when pressed further, he'd elaborate not with complicated formulas or obscure regimens, but with stories. About the way his grandmother insisted on early morning walks through fields damp with dew, the importance of finishing dinner before the sky went dark, and how every man needed a good friend to laugh with once a week, no exceptions. It sounded quaint at the time, but years later, as medical science raced to uncover the mysteries of disease prevention, one study after another began to validate what old Thomas seemed to understand without a medical degree. The things we do each day, those trivial, easily dismissed habits, are not so trivial after all. Take, for example, the early morning sun. In a world now bound to glowing screens and artificial light, we've forgotten the way our ancestors rose with the dawn. Yet the soft, golden light of early morning holds within it a gift we can't replicate in any laboratory. It awakens our biology, triggering the synthesis of a humble but powerful nutrient, vitamin D. But vitamin D isn't merely a vitamin. It behaves more like a hormone, weaving its influence through countless processes in the body. It strengthens bones, yes, but it also bolsters the immune system, regulates mood, and most strikingly, acts as a silent guardian against the formation of certain cancers. Decades of research now suggest that a deficiency in this simple nutrient correlates with higher risks of breast, prostate, and colon cancers. The remedy? A few quiet moments in the company of the rising sun. And so, one of the simplest acts of defiance against disease lies not in pills or syringes, but in stepping outside. Standing barefoot if you can, feeling the earth beneath you, letting the warmth of that ancient star settle upon your face and hands. 5, perhaps 10 minutes. A ritual older than civilization itself, one that asks nothing but your presence. It reminds me of a woman I met in the hills of Tuscany many years ago. Elena was her name, a widow in her 80s who rose each morning before the church bells to tend her garden. She spoke no English, yet in the language of gestures and sun-drenched smiles, she made her wisdom known. "The sun makes the body remember," she would say, tapping her chest. At the time, I assumed she meant warmth. Now, I understand it was life she spoke of. Beyond the light, there is the matter of what we place within our bodies. The modern world has made consumption an effortless thing. A drive-through window, a vending machine, a plastic-wrapped temptation on every shelf. Convenience has replaced consideration, and in doing so, it has quietly poisoned us. The earth was once our sole provider. Fruits warmed by the sun, roots drawn from dark soil, leaves tender and wild. These were our medicines before they became our meals. And within them, a complex symphony of compounds designed by nature to nourish, heal, and protect. Broccoli, cabbage, and kale, humble members of the cruciferous family, contain within them sulforaphane, a molecule that has demonstrated astonishing properties in laboratory studies, not merely inhibiting the growth of cancer cells but actively encouraging their death. Berries, vivid with blues and reds, burst with anthocyanins and antioxidants, counteracting the damage of free radicals long before those invisible assailants can trigger disease. Garlic, sharp and earthy, transforms when crushed, releasing allicin, a compound whose protective qualities have been recognized since ancient times. I once dined with a man in Kyoto, a scholar of traditional medicine. The meal was simple: steamed greens, fermented miso, and pickled vegetables. Each ingredient chosen not for its trendiness, but for its relationship with balance and health. He told me of Michiko, a village elder who prepared her meals with painstaking care, believing that each dish held the power to heal or to harm. She lived beyond 90, never having known the inside of a hospital ward. And though skeptics might attribute her longevity to chance, her descendants would quietly disagree. It is not the extravagance of what you eat, but its honesty. Food that remembers the soil, the sun, the sea. If you can trace what sits upon your plate back to a place, a plant, a living thing, you are likely feeding life. If it comes in a package, speaks in labels you cannot pronounce, or boasts of additives meant to imitate rather than nourish, you are feeding something else. And so the act of choosing your food becomes, in its own quiet way, a rebellion, not one of shouting or protest, but of gentle, persistent wisdom. The way an old oak tree stands unmoved by storms. Then, there is movement, not the frenetic, punishing kind demanded by glossy magazines, but the kind woven into the rhythm of living. A body was made to move. Muscles to pull and stretch, lungs to fill and empty, blood to course through veins like a river through a valley. In centuries past, it was unavoidable. Fields needed tending, water fetched, firewood gathered. Even in cities, life was walked, lifted, carried. Now, we sit, hours upon hours, tethered to glowing rectangles and artificial comforts, while within us, systems slow. Stagnation is a quiet poison. Studies now reveal that regular, moderate movement is one of the most reliable guardians against disease. Not just for the heart, but for the prevention of certain cancers. The precise mechanisms are complex: improved immune surveillance, hormone regulation, enhanced detoxification. Yet, the prescription is simple. Move as your ancestors did. Walk to feel the ground. Stretch because it feels good. Work with your hands, if only for the satisfaction of effort. I recall a letter written by a soldier during the First Great War. In the mud-soaked trenches, where death was a daily companion, he wrote to his wife of the orchards back home. Of the way dusk felt on his face as he walked the ridges, the ache of limbs from labor, the pleasure of movement for its own sake. If I live to see those hills again, he promised, I shall walk them every evening and let no man keep me from it. He returned, and he kept his word. The hills are said to have carried the echo of his steps for decades after. Then, there is rest. In a world that celebrates exhaustion and mistakes weariness for achievement, rest has become a forgotten virtue. But the body, like the earth, requires its seasons. There is a time to sow, a time to reap, and a time to let the fields lie fallow. Within the sacred dark of sleep, the body repairs, cells renew, the immune system strengthens its defenses, the mind unspools the tangled threads of the day. Inadequate sleep disrupts these processes, and evidence now links poor rest to heightened risks of numerous illnesses, cancer among them. A small hormone, melatonin, born of the night, acts as both guide and guardian. It soothes us into slumber, but also shields us in the hours we cannot guard ourselves. It is an antioxidant, a regulator, a protector. Yet its production is fragile, easily disrupted by artificial light and restless minds. To sleep well is to arm yourself. To darken your room, silence the chime of devices, and surrender to the hush of night is to honor a ritual as ancient as the stars. The sailor adrift at sea, the shepherd beneath an open sky, the queen in her high chamber, all have known the grace of sleep. And lastly, the company you keep. In the end, it matters. The human heart is not built for isolation. Loneliness corrodes health as surely as any toxin. And connection, genuine, uncomplicated, fortifies us. Those who surround you either nourish your spirit or deplete it. Friends who laugh easily, who share burdens without calculation, who remember your stories, these are not luxuries. They are medicine. Studies affirm what poets and old souls have long known: the heart fed by companionship beats longer and stronger. I met an old fisherman once who spoke of a custom in his village. At dusk, men gathered to watch the tide. No words, no boasts, just the presence of one another. A man's life is shorter when no one speaks his name, he told me. And so it is. There's a quiet language spoken in the company of those who truly see you. It's not one made of grand declarations or elaborate gestures, but of shared silences, of memories remembered without being retold, of burdens halved by nothing more than the steady, unbroken presence of another soul nearby. This, too, is medicine, though no physician's prescription pad will bear its name. When you trace the history of those places where long lives were commonplace, whether the sun-drenched villages of Sardinia, the misty mountain hamlets of Okinawa, or the gentle valleys of Nicoya, you find not only clean air and simple food, but rich, enduring human connection. Communities small enough for every man's sorrow to be known and his joys to be celebrated. No one grew old alone. No one faced their dusk without the warmth of another's hand nearby. Modern science, catching up as it often does to ancient wisdom, now tells us that strong social ties lower stress hormones, strengthen immunity, and even reduce the risk of certain cancers. It seems the heart, when tended by love and friendship, sends ripples through the flesh itself, turning away illness in the same quiet, persistent way a stream carves through stone. I remember a pair of sisters from a coastal town in Maine. Eleanor and Ruth. Neither had married, though not for lack of offers. They lived together all their lives in a clapboard house with lace curtains and a garden thick with wild roses. Every evening they played cards at a small wooden table by the window. They spoke of trivial things, the antics of neighborhood children, the stubbornness of the cat, the progress of the seasons. When Ruth passed at 92, Eleanor followed quietly 3 months later. It was said, though perhaps only by romantics, that her heart simply lost its will to stay. Whether or not it was true, none who knew them doubted that their long, contented lives were bound to one another. The lesson remains: do not underestimate the quiet power of human warmth. Seek it, treasure it, offer it freely, for within those simple exchanges lies a shield against life's inevitable shadows. And now, we arrive at a truth that many resist, not out of ignorance, but from fear. It concerns what we place within our bodies that was never meant to be there. Toxins. The chemicals slipped unnoticed into the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the products we trust. For much of history, nature was the sole pharmacy. Plants provided remedies, minerals soothed ailments, and even poisons were known and respected. But in the modern age, man has filled his world with invisible dangers. Pesticides clinging to the skin of fruit, preservatives whispering through processed meat, synthetic fragrances and dyes dancing through the bloodstream. Some of these chemicals, known as endocrine disruptors, mimic the body's natural hormones, throwing delicate systems into disarray. Others bind to DNA itself, encouraging mutations that, left unchecked, become the seeds of cancer. Yet they persist because they are convenient, profitable, and unseen. To live wholly free of them may be impossible, but to reduce one's exposure is not. Choose glass over plastic, especially where heat or acidity are involved. Wash, produce well, or better still, grow what you can. Read labels not for the promises they shout, but for the ingredients they whisper. In matters of the body's temple, less is often more. I recall a doctor from the highlands of Peru. A man trained both in modern medicine and the plant lore of his ancestors. He spoke of a mountain herb used to purify water before modern filters were known. Yet when asked what the greatest purifier was, he smiled and said, "A life with fewer poisons in it to begin with." There is wisdom there. As the sun arcs its way toward evening, another ancient healer makes itself known: stillness. Not the numbing kind brought by screens and digital noise, but the true, unadorned silence that allows the spirit to gather itself. Our ancestors knew this well. Monks upon mountaintops, shepherds beneath an endless sky, even the lone fisherman watching the tide. In those moments when words fell away and only breath remained, the body and mind came into alignment. Modern research confirms what sages suspected: chronic stress alters immunity, encourages inflammation, and fosters an environment where illness thrives. To guard against this is neither costly nor complicated. It requires no special robes or chants, though you're welcome to them if you wish. A quiet room, the steady rhythm of breath, the practice of presence. Even a few minutes a day slows the pulse, calms the nervous system, and bolsters the defenses that guard against disease. The body, after all, cannot fight when it is endlessly braced for battle. It must be given moments of peace to gather strength. In a monastery garden in northern France, I once met a man who had not spoken in 15 years. A vow, freely chosen. Yet his eyes gleamed with a serenity I have seldom seen. When asked, through a written note, how he maintained his health so well into old age, he scribbled 2 words: "I listen." And perhaps that is what stillness teaches us, not merely the absence of noise, but the rediscovery of our own quiet wisdom. Then, there is water. The first medicine, and still the finest. Before pills, before tinctures, before syringes, there was water. Clear, unadulterated, pulled from wells, streams, and rains. Modern men and women, curiously, have forgotten its power. They replace it with colored, carbonated things, with chemical concoctions in bright bottles. But no drink nourishes the cells, flushes toxins, and maintains the subtle balance of salts and minerals quite like water. It aids digestion, cushions joints, and carries away the debris of cellular battle. More importantly, in a world of constant consumption, water is an act of simplicity. A declaration that not every thirst need be sweetened, branded, or sold. A desert tribesman once told me, "When you wake, drink water. When you tire, drink water. When you are sorrowed, drink water. It will remind you that you are alive." And so it does. Even the breath itself, that unnoticed act repeated tens of thousands of times a day, carries its own wisdom. Shallow, anxious breathing keeps the body in a state of low-grade alarm. Deep, deliberate breaths from the diaphragm signal safety, reducing stress hormones, oxygenating tissues, and improving circulation. When combined with gentle movement, a slow walk, a simple stretch, a climb up the hillside, it becomes a tonic, one that fortifies the body's defenses without cost or side effect. And then there are the ancient plants. Not merely as food, but as allies. Turmeric with its golden warmth, long revered in Eastern medicine for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Green tea, rich in catechins, guarding cells from damage. Medicinal mushrooms, reishi, chaga, lion's mane, fostering resilience where modern medicine often falters. To incorporate these need not be a complex ritual. A pinch of spice in the stew. A steaming cup at dawn. A tincture taken with the evening wind. An herbalist in the Carpathian Mountains once told me, "The earth has grown everything a man needs to heal, long before he knew how to ask for it." It is the forgetting that harms us. And so, if there is a lesson to be drawn, it is not that one must chase miracles or fear the unknown. It is that life, in its simplest, oldest forms, still holds the keys to health. That 5 or 6 small, deliberate acts, done not once, but daily, as one tends a flame, can lengthen life and sweeten its years. The battle against cancer, then, is not a war waged solely in laboratories and clinics. It is 1,000 small choices made in the quiet hours of ordinary days. To wake and greet the sun. To eat what remembers the earth. To move as though your body was meant to carry you. To rest in the hush of night. To hold others near. To drink water, to breathe deeply. To sit in stillness. These are not new things. They are ancient, nearly forgotten things. And yet they endure because truth does. There's something to be said for the wisdom of seasons. The old ones knew to live by them. They understood that the world moved not in straight lines, but in circles. That there was a time for sowing, a time for harvest, and a time to leave the fields bare so the soil might heal. In our relentless modernity, we've forgotten that the body, too, is a field. And it, too, requires cycles of labor and rest, of building and cleansing, of action and silence. I recall walking through an ancient olive grove in the hills outside Athens. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their trunks split by centuries, yet their branches bore fruit as they had since before the birth of empires. An old man tending the grove, his skin like sun-baked parchment, spoke of how each tree was given a year of light pruning, never too much, never too little, and a season without harvest so it might gather itself for what lay ahead. A tree that never rests, he told me, will die before its time. So it is with us. In the endless bustle of modern life, we forget to grant our bodies these seasons of care. We move from one obligation to the next, burdening ourselves with tasks and indulgences, seldom pausing to tend the inner grove. Yet within us, quietly, cells divide, immune systems labor, and the steady pulse of life continues its work. And in that work, small errors, undetected damage, and quiet threats begin to accumulate. Cancer is not an invader from without. It is the body's own cells, gone astray. Cells that, under stress, under siege, are deprived of their natural order, forget their design. But the soil in which these troubled cells grow can be made less hospitable by the choices we make, not with monumental, impossible changes, but with small, deliberate ones. The food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, these are not mere background to our days, but the very materials from which our bodies are built and rebuilt. And so, we return to simplicity. A handful of fresh berries in the early morning light. A glass of clean water before the sun reaches its highest point. A moment's pause at dusk to stretch limbs weary from labor. These are not acts of luxury, they are survival. And in honoring them, we honor ourselves. There's a kind of quiet bravery in choosing the slow, the old ways in a world obsessed with speed and spectacle. In a society that promises miracle cures and instant solutions, to step back and tend to the ordinary is an act of subtle defiance. A woman I knew in the high country of the Andes kept bees. Not for profit, nor for sport, but because she believed in the ancient bond between people and the creatures of the earth. Every morning she drank warm water with a spoonful of raw honey and a squeeze of lemon. She lived past 100, her voice still strong, her back straight as a reed. When asked about her secret, she would laugh and say, "I wake, I move, I eat what is clean, and I love the earth." What else is there? Indeed, what else is there? Among the most overlooked of life's quiet medicines is laughter. The kind that rises without warning, that shakes the belly and leaves the eyes wet. Long before modern researchers discovered its physiological effects, the lowering of stress hormones, the boost to immune function, the dilation of blood vessels, ancient people understood its worth. Laughter was shared around fires, in harvest fields, in crowded kitchens. It was a balm for grief, a cure for despair, and a celebration of survival. A man who laughed easily was considered rich, regardless of his coin. A woman whose eyes danced with mischief was believed to carry luck wherever she went. In those cultures where long lives were common, humor was never far from hardship. The Sardinian shepherds who lived to see their great-grandchildren born cracked jokes even as they limped back from long days in the hills. The Okinawan grandmothers who prepared bowls of seaweed and rice punctuated their tasks with teasing and shared stories. Perhaps the body, like the spirit, can only carry so much burden before it needs to lighten itself. And in that lightening, the darkness retreats. Music, too, is a medicine most have forgotten. Not the endless noise of pop charts or background hum, but true music. The kind that stirs the blood or stills the heart. The sound of an old cello, a voice lifted in unguarded song, the simple clatter of a drum. These things recalibrate us in ways science is only beginning to measure. Rhythm calms the nervous system. Melody softens the mind's edges. And harmony reminds us that even discord, when carefully arranged, becomes something beautiful. A Hungarian violinist once told me that every man's life has its theme, a melody only he can hear. Those who listen well, he said, live longer, for they move in time with their own song. And perhaps there's truth in that. Touch is another of the old magics. In a world increasingly mediated by glass screens and digital words, the simple act of placing one's hand on another's shoulder, of holding a weathered palm, of embracing, has been diminished. Yet the body was designed for touch. The skin's receptors translated into calm, into reassurance, into connection. Elderly men and women who live alone grow ill more swiftly. Children without touch falter in growth and spirit. Lovers separated by cold distance lose some essential glow. And in every study ever done, those surrounded by the warmth of others live longer, fall sick less often, and heal more swiftly when wounds come. A mother in an African village once told me, "We carry our babies so they will remember how the earth holds them." We are, after all, creatures made to be held, by hands, by hearts, by the weight of another's regard. And so, in the end, it circles back to presence. To choosing to be here, in this moment, alive to the quiet, to the warmth of sun on skin, to the taste of water, to the scent of wood smoke at dusk. Modernity, for all its glittering promises, often robs us of this. It fragments our days, steals our attention, and leaves us hollow with its bright, empty noise. The truest shield against illness, against the erosion of years and the silent creep of disease, is to reclaim one's life while it is still unfolding. Wake early enough to watch the light change. Eat food whose name you know and whose story you can tell. Walk, not to arrive, but to move. Rest, not as an indulgence, but as a necessity. Gather with those whose laughter restores you. Drink water clear and cold. Listen to your own pulse when the world grows loud. In the quiet places of old villages, in the memories of those who lived long and well, these truths remain. They do not promise immortality, no honest thing does. But they offer something finer, a life lived fully, a body tended with care, and a measure of protection against the illnesses that prey upon neglect. And if, in your final years, you can sit beneath a tree with skin browned by sun and hands strong from honest labor, surrounded by those who call your name with love, you will have done enough. In the end, it isn't the grand gestures that keep us here longer, it's the quiet choices, made each day with care. A walk at dawn, a meal prepared with love, a moment of stillness beneath the sky. The old ways endure because they work. If this story stirred something in you, consider joining us. Subscribe for more timeless wisdom to nourish your body and spirit. Because life is precious, and it's meant to be lived well, for as long as we're given.